Today we will be discussing Extra by Iyun Lee. Background: this story takes place in Beijing, China, and the story revolves around Granny Lin, who is a 51-year-old woman who never got married. Granny Lin experiences her first love at her old age with a 6-year-old boy named King. Although her love for him was not necessarily romantic, it was the first time she felt the love and desire to be with someone. As quote from the story, she wonders if this is what people call falling in love. The desire to be with someone every minute of the rest of her life, so strong that sometimes she is frightened herself. The story starts off with Granny Lin retiring from Beijing Red Star Garment Factory after it went bankrupt and she is left with no pension. Granny Lin is left desperate for money and work in order to survive. Her neighbor, Auntie Wang, pushes her and eventually convinces her to marry an old widower so that she may inherit money after he dies. Granny Lin was reluctant to marry, however, her financial situation influenced her to get matched in a relationship with Old Tang, who is an old man suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Old Tang believes that his wife who passed away, Sujin, is still alive and in the hospital. For a few months, Granny Lin takes good care of Old Tang and does the household chores. Then, one night, Old Tang is alarmed to see Granny Lin bathing him instead of Sujin. She has trouble calming him down, and Old Tang slips and falls in the tub, which leads to his death. And quote from the story, "I did not kill him," Granny Lin imagines herself telling every person there. "He was dying before the fall." But she does not tell the truth to anyone, and instead admits her negligence. His death is blamed on Granny Lin, and she is left unemployed and without any inheritance. She is then suggested to work as a maid at a prestigious private boarding school called Mei Mei Academy. It is there that she meets King, who was sent away to live there by his father. It seems as though King is unwanted at his father's house since the father has married a new wife. King is the only one who stays at the school over the weekends, and Granny Lin was assigned the duty to take care of him during that time. Granny Lin looks after King and takes good care of him, which leads to a strong bond between the two. This was the first time that Granny Lin experienced the nature of falling in love with someone. She experienced genuine feelings of wanting to be with someone, as opposed to being with someone for money like she did with Old Tang. And a quote from the story, Granny Lin wonders if this is the love she missed in her younger years, hand in hand with a dear boy. End quote. Later on in the story, it is discovered that the girls' socks have been going missing. Granny Lin discovers that King has been taking them from the laundry room where she works, and he has been hiding them in his bed. Granny Lin can't find herself confronting him on the issue, so instead she buys girl socks and leaves them in the laundry room for him to steal. One night, Kang's roommate catches King stroking his cheeks with the girl's socks in his hands. He then gets bullied and picked on at school for his strange obsession with the girl's socks. Then one weekend, King got frustrated, so he hid from Granny Lin. He was nowhere to be found, so the police and authorities were called. King later reveals himself and Granny Lin is dismissed for her negligence. At the very end, while Granny Lin was leaving the school, her duffel bag got stolen. However, it is revealed that she keeps her savings in her metal lunch pail, so she has not in fact lost everything. And quote from the story, "That's why she never lost anything important. These 3,000 yuan of dismissal is safe in the lunch pail, as are several unopened packages of girls' socks, colorful with floral patterns, souvenirs of her short love story." End quote.
Moving into the different ideas that we see as a reader in Lee's Extra, we encounter a pretty significant play of events which ultimately begs the question of how money might influence our relationships with other people in everyday life. From the very start of our reading, we're introduced to a situation where the protagonist, Granny Lin, has been honorably retired from the Beijing Red Star Garment Factory without a pension to compensate for her employment status. We see immediately that money is going to be a primary point of focus in terms of influencing factors that would benefit her in a sustainable lifestyle. With proper historical context, one can reasonably argue that the economic situation for an average working class individual in communist era China would be nothing more than barely sustainable, as a large portion of China's population would be considered to be financially impoverished. With this connection in mind, we can relate those trends with the lifestyle that Granny Lin experiences in her timeline. Upon the recommendation of Auntie Wang, Lin decides to pursue marrying men for the purpose of inheriting money, despite all the emotional and ethical contracts that would go within such a commitment. On page 2, Wang says, use your brain, not a caretaker but a wife. That way, you can at least inherit some cash when your husband dies. This shows the reader that Lin doesn't necessarily prioritize such a relationship in her life and doesn't immediately assess that she could gain finances. Moving forward as a result of this, Lin begins to experience emotions tying both into love and loneliness that she has never felt before. Personally, I think this idea is more prevalent in the real world than one might initially think. Because money is a material means of accessing goods and products, who's to say that money can't influence love? In any case, I strongly believe that money has the power to generate love, but not actually buy it. General trends seem to show that it's easier to fall in love with someone with more money, as more affluent individuals possess the resources to attain a more favorable life for love, making life easier as well, especially in Granny Lynn's situation. I'd also like to extend this idea to the rest of the class as well, as I think many more points can be touched upon this idea.
Throughout her life, why hasn't Granny Lynn gotten married? I believe that the answer to this question is fairly simple and could be summarized into one sentence. To choose to get married, a person must first fall in love. Granny Lynn has never gotten married because she has never fallen in love. Why she's never fallen in love is, in my opinion, due to two reasons. The first being her name. Being called Granny Lynn meant that people thought she was either already married or too old to get married. In the story, Granny Lynn no longer remembers in what year of her life people started to call her Granny Lynn instead of Auntie Lynn. Unmarried women, people believe, age faster. So, her name could have had a direct impact on her finding love and for her to fall in love and through it get married. The second reason behind why Granny Lynn might have never fallen in love is the clear lack of interaction she's had with males. In the story, Old Tang is the only man Granny Lynn has seen fully naked. The first time she undressed him, she could not help stealing a look at the penis nestled in a thinning bush. To have never been with a man before meant that Granny Lynn must have never gone through, for example, customary traditions like romantic dates or lunches, etc., with men. And so, how would you expect her to get married if she's never had the chance to find a man for her to love in order for her to marry? However, I'd like to ask myself another question, and the question is, how important is love? After reading this story, I found my personal take on it is as follows. To exist in a world where love is not experienced is to not live at all. Love, and more precisely, early love, the kind that you would experience in your teenage life, is a very important checkpoint in life. To love at a young age means that you are open to a whole new emotion or sensation that you've never felt before. You are introduced to a whole new world of possibilities and escapades that prove to be a vital step when moving forward and going into your adulthood. Lynn hasn't experienced that. She's never seen love in any of its forms. She's never had to think of someone so dearly and affectionately like she saw herself forced to do with old Tang, or like she really first felt with Kang, the clueless little 6-year-old that would prove to be Lynn's first ever encounter with true love. Love is an impacting emotion, and feeling it is vital for human beings to evolve in their life. Lynn clearly lacked that, which led to the events that we saw in the story. Up until the end, where I personally believe that Lee, the author, wanted to send a message. And the message is as follows. Whether or not your first love was romantic, at a late stage in life, or with someone you never expected, it would still end in the way it always does. Heartbreak.
One of the more interesting and seemingly random parts of the story occur when the readers discover that Kang has been stealing socks from the laundry room and deriving some form of pleasure from them. It is at this point in the story where the plot diverges from implicit sexual references to something a little bit more explicit. The way that I interpret this is attempting to offer commentary on the nature of sexual fetishes and how they're explored from one's own perspective and a societal perspective. This situation raises a lot of questions that can be answered to take away a message relating to the themes of sex and love, some of which are as follows. Is King old enough to know what he's doing and understand the desires that propel him to steal the socks? Is there an appropriate age at which it is okay to begin to explore sexual desires? Further, what is the role of society in influencing these behaviors? Do different cultures, like individualistic versus communalistic cultures, have an influence? And lastly, is Granny Lynn justified in hiding Kang's secrets from everyone else and experiencing it, or rather encouraging it? It can be noted that from this, Kang experiences a level of societal ostracization after his secret is revealed. Why does this exist? Is it the same in modern society? Personally, I think the story offers some sort of commentary on what society tends to do when it discovers something that is considered to be a deviation from the norm. Kang experiences this form of sexual deviation in his younger years, which may or may not have an effect on his sexual experiences later on. For example, what effect may him having been outed have had on him, psychologically speaking? This story sort of urges acceptance, kind of like how Granny Lynn accepted Kang regardless of his deviances. She found love and loved him for who he was. Maybe this is trying to say that sexual fetishes are not understood and as such are looked down upon by people and people are judged, but it's really nothing special and maybe accepting them from a younger age instead of repressing those feelings may be something that's beneficial. This commentary can even be taken outside of the context of Kang. Maybe it's trying to say that partners should engage in open dialogue about sexual interests in order to achieve what's best for both of them. It also begins to reveal how a large social stigma exists around this, which leads to more ostracization and marginalization. It takes a huge psychological toll, and they might be urging some form of reconciliation.
When diving into these questions, it is helpful for us to first understand why this reading was placed into this unit. This unit is defined as relationships, sex, and love. Extra by Yuen Lin tells us the story of just that. Granny Lin's love for Kang, her relationships with old Tang, Kang, and herself, and how her relationship is affected by the young boy's sexual behavior. It is through the experiences with the other characters that we can see how Granny Lin views herself. When examining her relationship with old Tang, we can see how she never truly thinks of herself as his wife, and instead, just his caretaker. When we look at the quote, Granny Lin looks down at herself. She is wearing a bright yellow plastic poncho and a pair of grass green rubber boots, her outfit for bath time. I am your wife, she says. Granny Lin notices how she is dressed as his caretaker. A true wife would not be in boots and a poncho to avoid getting wet. She knows that her relationship with old Tang is not truly a marriage and has to look at how she is presented before she can even say the word wife. She never gets to enjoy being married and having a husband. She sees herself as an outsider, even in her own marriage. She has never been given an opportunity to love someone and be loved in return until she meets Kang. This child is the first time she's ever been loved for just being herself. Her love for Kang is not rooted in a desire for money or other personal gain, and instead, their relationship grows because they are both alone. Kang's parents don't want him, and Granny Lin has no one else to take care of her. I think that Granny Lin sees herself in the boy, especially when she says, the thought of the boy, who is so small and occupies almost no space in the world, yet is still in other people's way and has to be got rid of, saddens Granny Lin. Granny Lin has only ever tried to help people, but is thought of as negligent and incapable. She knows what this boy feels and wants to protect him from the harshness of the world. This shows that Granny Lin is learning how to love. Even after Granny Lin finds the socks that Kang has stolen, that does not make her love him any less. She even buys more socks to ensure that he does not get punished for his actions. At the end of the story, she ultimately allows herself to be sacrificed. The quote, all she knows is what he told the school supervisor, that he fell asleep under the piano. Granny Lin knows that this is not true, but she loves the boy enough that she is willing to put him before her. She protected him when she first found he had stolen the socks, and continues to protect him after he ran away. Granny Lin offers love to both Old Tang and Kang even through their faults. She does not fight when Old Tang's family believes her negligence killed their family member, or when the school fires her after Kang runs away. Regardless of others' perception of her, she puts people before herself. Finishing this story is quite sad. Even after everything she has been through, she does not get a happy ending. All she has left of her relationship with Kang is her memories and the socks she bought to replace the ones he stole. To her, the socks are not symbols of a dirty desire. They are symbols of a child that does not even understand the world. She understands what it is like to be unfairly judged, and she does not allow herself to judge Kang.